This is Amplify You, the podcast about you discovering your message and broadcasting it to the world. If you're a coach, author, or speaker, you'll want to tune in. If you're looking for the best return on your time investment to get your message out to the world in a bigger way, we're giving you full access and behind the scenes look of how we're running our podcast, how our clients have found success, and what you can do to launch your podcast today. The world needs your message. I'm Michelle Abraham, the host. Join my family as we unleash your unique genius and find the connections you need to launch your adventure today. Join us and let's get amplified. Hey, Amplify You family. Michelle Abraham, your host here today with a behind the mic interview. You know what? Today, guys, I've got a special treat for you. I've got Laban Ditchburn with me today. He is the world's best courage coach and the host of Become Your Own Superhero. Hey, Laban, how you doing?
Michelle Abraham, lovely to see your face as always. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am so glad. And for those of you guys who are only on audio, you have to see Laban's amazing outfit. He is coming to us all the way from Mexico with no shirt on, but a nice white blazer and a purple handkerchief in it. So you are dressed for the occasion. I love it. And I can guarantee you probably just have shorts on underneath, right?
It's exactly what's going on. Yeah. And I must correct you out of necessity. It's actually a light pink coat. So maybe you can't see that through on the thing.
But
that's very important. Very important distinction.
Amazing. It is very important. Now that I know that it's light pink, I can sort of see the light pink. Yes. Awesome. Well, oh my gosh. Tell us. I want to share your story, but I'm never going to do it justice. So I would love for you to kind of like take us on your podcasting journey. What the heck made you start a podcast and like why? But guys, let me tell you, Laban's podcast is one of those anomalies. It's a podcast that has gotten some great traction with it. You've inspired so many humongous names to come onto your podcast right from like day one. And so I want to dive into the part of that in this conversation. But first of all, let's just hear like what inspired you to start a podcast in the first place?
It's such fond memories, Michelle. And the first thing I would say is I really want to acknowledge you and the work that you're doing. And if you're listening to this for the first time, you need to subscribe and consume the other amazing guests that Michelle has because she's a whirlwind of knowledge. So it's very important. Podcasting changed my life. My story really is overcoming addiction, drinking and drugs and gambling and philandering. And I realized after conquering all of that I wanted to become a speaker. And I planned to kick that off at the end of 2020. In January of 2020, I was like, right, I'm going to do it a year from now, kick off. And then COVID hit. And we were living in Australia, in Melbourne, in what was the most locked down city in the world. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing else to do apart from create a podcast because we had curfews. You know, you could only go out for shopping for an hour. And, you being in Canada, you can kind of empathize with what was going on. Mm-hmm. The last weekend before the lockdown kicked in, literally the last weekend, my wife and I spent the last of our money going to a Professional Speakers Australia conference in South Australia, about an hour's flight from Melbourne. And I networked my tail off. And it was a 3-day event surrounded by the best speakers and coaches in Australia. And I was witnessing all the people standing out in the hallway as like a year's worth of speaking engagements were cancelled. Some people lost, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Gosh, yeah.
But during that time, Anna and I had a really great impact on the people there. We were just so thirsty and receptive. And so when we came back and went into lockdown, I had a small number of speakers that I'd really resonated with that I could call upon. And so they were my first half a dozen guests. You talk about bringing on a big guest. Well, I was able to bring on Les Brown. And when I reached out to him, I got his phone number and I cold called him and he picked up and I invited him on. And he never asked me how many subscribers I had, which was 10. And I think 5 of those were family members that did it out of generosity, right? Or sympathy. And that really kickstarted the bravery, as in bringing on the best people that I could learn from ever. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to become my whole thing was to be well on my way to being known as the world's most positively influential speaker. So what would I do? I would invite the best speakers on the planet. And because of the lockdown, they weren't speaking. It was like, yeah, I'll come on your podcast. You got a bit of spunk about you, son. And then it just dominoed from there.
Wow.
And one begat two, and two begat three, and the rest is history, really. But during a time of a lot of fear and scarcity, it was the greatest blessing in disguise. I was forced into writing my first book during that time, which was inspired directly from Les Brown, from the podcast interview that we did together. And that's really how it started out.
Wow, that's so cool. And it's interesting to see how you were in that space where everyone's speaking engagements were being canceled, and just like the fear and like coming over that whole industry. Yet you dove into the very similar industry of like the podcasting, where you are speaking on your own show and you've made it successful, a successful go at it. And so I'd love for you to share with us, like, what is it about reaching out to people that, I know you're the world's best courage coach. And, it's one of those things, I think a lot of people don't have the courage to reach out to people that have had a name, or that you maybe admire and feel like are out of reach. But having a podcast gives you that opportunity to reach out to some of those people. Is there anything that you've done or said in those conversations of reaching out, or is it really just having the courage to pick up the phone or start an email and reach out?
Look, this is just my experience, and there's probably a million different ways to skin a cat with this, but I seem to have had some of the best success out of most people that I've spoken to about this. So you would assume I'm onto a winner. I approach every interaction in life now, become really disciplined with what value can I add this person's life. And that's not a podcast guest. Specifically, that's anyone. If I'm going grocery shopping, the UPS guy, like whoever, the IT support guy in Bangalore, like, how can I improve this person's life? And when you operate from that mindset, you release an energy that resonates with your people. And the people that ended up coming on the podcast, for the most part, were inevitably my people. And what I mean by that is we operate at certain vibrational frequencies. And that I was attracting those people that understood the significance of what I was doing, and they entered into the arrangement without any expectation. And I think that was a real catalyst. I would have people occasionally say, how many subscribers do you have? How many downloads do you have? Pay me $5,000. And those people were usually sort of mediocre level. I was able to get some of the best Nobel Prize winners and, multiple gold medal winning athletes and, movie stars and, Oprah's spiritual guide for free. I never paid a single person a single dime for any of my interviews. But what I got was thousands of hours of knowledge worth.
Right.
And I've worked this out, like in excess of millions of dollars, because of the, how much people charge for their time and access to them, and through reading their books for those that have published authors beforehand, watching other things. So that's really been the main thing. Certainly the self-belief to know that I'm worthy to have conversations at that level was all part of a lot of the work that I did in my healing journey.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right there. Like, to that you're worthy of having conversations of that level. Like, and I love how I have heard you say this before, how you treated everyone as an equal too. Like, you don't see them as any better than you, or and I think that's where it puts people in some sort of weird state where they feel like, timid to reach out because they're, that self-worth piece a little bit too. I love the way you approach things with how can I add value to this person's life? So give us an example of a podcast interview that you've had where, showed up, there's your podcast guestie and they're going to give you some amazing content. What are some things that you've done to help, add value to someone else's life? And I'm only asking you this because I know I've heard a few of the stories. So it might seem like a weird question, but I know some of your answers. So.
It's totally loaded. And I love this question, Michelle. One of my favorite ones has to be with Jack Canfield. And for those who don't know, he's the co-creator and author of Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, which have sold collectively 600 million books globally. All right. He also wrote Success Principles. He's been on Oprah's show countless times and is regarded as the #1 success coach in North America, nay, the world, right? He was introduced to me via someone else. So I didn't get a chance to speak to him like I ordinarily would have. But he came on the podcast, Michelle, and he was fatigued from, this was during the back end of 2020. So he'd been on lots of podcasts. Everything was still on lockdown. And he was pretty distant and cold. And I thought, man, how am I going to get out of this? Because this is going to go south quick. So I said to him, hey, Jack, and we're on a Zoom call. He goes, yeah. I said, I've got a commitment for you. He said, what's that, Laban? I said, Jack, you're going to leave this podcast with more energy than when you started. Right? That was all I could commit to at that point. And even that was a bit ambiguous. And his whole body language shifted, right? And he went, all right, Laban, I'm going to hold you to that. And I said, all right, let's go, Jack, 3, 2, 1. And the first question I said was, Jack, my wife and I at that point had gone through the loss of 14 consecutive miscarriages. What advice would you give us to help bring this baby into the world?
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Right? Now, I can tell you now, after having it verified from Jack Canfield, he'd never been asked that question before. Right. He went into full Jack Canfield success principles mode and answered it in the most beautiful way possible. And then it triggered his engagement. It was an amazing podcast we did together. The second question I asked him, though, was, Jack, what do you need help with? You know, the #1 success coach in the world. He said, Laban, very arrogantly, I don't have any challenges, Laban. I'm doing really good. And then he thought about it for a second. He goes, oh, actually, I've been trying to lose 15 pounds of belly fat for the last 12 months. And I said, hey, Jack. He goes, yeah, Laban. I said, today's your lucky day. He said, why is that, Laban? I said, because of what I didn't tell you about my magnificent transformation. It was that I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on 30 pounds of muscle. And if that's something you want to have a discussion at the end of the podcast, you just let me know. Well, I had the #1 success coach in the world talking and asking me for 15 minutes at the end of the show off camera about what I did to lose this weight. And that was a moment, Michelle, where I realized I could operate and play at the top level. I know that I can add value to people's lives that on the surface of it and on paper look like they got it all together. And I can tell you this with 100% certainty. Even the most successful people in the world need help sometimes. And maybe you're the person that can help them with it.
Yeah, that's so great. Such a great insight. Now I'm curious about your first question though. What was the thought behind that first question? Was it just out of curiosity genuinely out of curiosity for his answer, or was that kind of a planned thing for like shock value?
Do you know what? I think there's probably a little from column A, a little from column B, maybe a column C that I don't know about. You know, it sounds like we're joking about it, but it's a real challenge that my wife and I are looking to get to the bottom of. And because I've been able to ask that question of other people, you know, I asked Iyanla Van Zandt as well, who's Oprah Winfrey's coach. And she introduced us to some faith healers and some spirit guides. And so I've done this with maybe half a dozen people since that, right? And I'm getting outcomes that don't exist to regular people for free, right? None of this has cost anything. And I don't know how else I can describe how beautiful that is. It's an unintended, beautiful byproduct of doing a podcast, right?
Yeah, and life-changing too, right? Like, I mean, some of those connections that you've made now from the podcast have gone on and you've done business things with other people, or, you know, you have an event coming up actually in September. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Well, this is another great example of the power of podcasting. You know, a friend and business partner of mine, Tony Schmaltz, asked me to speak at an event he wanted to create in Panama City Beach in Florida in September of 2022, September 17th and 18th. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. I said, what do you need help with? He's like, oh, I'd love to get some big name speakers there. And I said, well, who would you like to get? He goes, oh, it'd be great to get Tony Robbins. I said, well, I don't know Tony Robbins, but I know Les Brown, and I know Kevin Sorbo, and I know Waldo Waldman, and I know Tom Ziegler. And these are all our headline speakers at this event now. And it was through the credibility, the likability, the respect, the service that I now have varying levels of relationship with these people, where I can pick up a phone and ring them and say, hey, Kevin, hey, Les, hey, we've got this event. Would you like to be involved? And that's what's happening. Like it's miraculous, right?
Amazing. And you and Anna also got to spend some time in the US going and traveling. And it was really cool to hear that you stayed at a lot of people's places or met up with people who you had interviewed on your podcast as well.
We stayed for 2 out of the 3 months we're in the US at former podcast guests or people that have come through podcast guest homes, multi-million-dollar mansions on Lake Austin, like the most extraordinary stuff. And again, like it didn't cost anything. It's just, and we've been able to pump a whole heap of value into some of those people's lives as well.
Amazing. I just love that the way the magic and the connections happen for you through your podcast. And so what do you think has really helped transpire all those connections of staying connected beyond the podcast? And I know that's something that people talk about a lot, where it's like a podcast episode sometimes can feel transactional to people. And it's there, it's really should be the beginning of a relationship. And you've done a great job of continuing those relationships on. Any advice for our listeners that are maybe struggling with that?
So I don't force anything, right? Like people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And there'll be times in your life where you'll spend more time with one person and then you might seem like you're bouncing around. But as long as you are not tying any outcome to any service, I mentioned this earlier, like if you are, anytime you can think of a way to serve someone without any expectation, a quick text message, an acknowledgement or whatever, like that's how I do it. I've now had thousands of interactions with people, not just podcast guests. And it's impossible to keep track of everything. I do my best. I've got a great memory, but like it's not that good. And so I just leave. People don't remember what you say or what you do. They remember how you make them feel. All right. So just remember that. That's a real important thing. If you operate from that service mindset, you can never, you'll always be known as someone who's like hugely beneficial to be around, particularly with the more high profile guests, right? Because a lot of people want to take.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And then when someone wants to give, it's like, hang on a second.
What?
That's different. That's a different fear.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great explanation of that. And it's interesting how much that law of reciprocity comes into play, but leading with just being able to give and support and doing it so genuinely as you do. I think that's do you think that's an innate quality in someone, or do you think that's a skill that's learned?
Look, my father's a retired radio announcer. And he always did really good.
That's why you got a good voice.
Right. Well, I've also worked really hard on my voice. I've done like vocal training and a bunch of other things as well to make it better. And I think 150 podcasts, plus another 50 that I've been interviewed, plus thousands of hours talking helps. But I was reading something recently, Michelle, about charisma. And this might be beneficial. I was trying to figure out what it is because people have told me that I'm very charismatic. It didn't used to be the case. And it seems to be being present with someone, pretending like there's not even pretending, just being there with them so that nothing else really exists and actively listening, and the power is in the listener. And I try to do that as best I can. And that's the one thing that I would recommend that you get good at. Don't worry about trying to formulate your next question. If you really pay attention and be present, all right, you'll be able to formulate a really interesting question and ask questions that you want to know the answer to, not what you think your audience do, right? Do it for you. The right energy will attract the right people. And if it's not a Joe Rogan level download for now, don't worry about it. Just stick to your guns, be authentic and be real.
Love it. That's a great reminder. I remember being so caught up on like what the next question is going to be in interviews when my early on podcasting days that you miss the good stuff because you're so focused on what's coming next. It doesn't make for a good listen for your audience.
Yeah,
so Laban, yeah. So Laban, before we let you go, any words of advice for our podcasters that are thinking about starting out a podcast or thinking about putting the time into creating one?
Yeah, do it. Do it. It honestly is one of the greatest things I've ever done. It gave me a platform where there was none. It gave me credibility where there was none. It gave me a voice where there was no voice. And it's given me a skill set that has become incredibly valuable. I've become not just a podcaster, but a publicist, a PR agent, a super connector, the ultimate networker. And you can create a wonderful lifestyle for yourself off the back of doing this, and stick at it. Get 100 episodes in you before you decide whether you want to stop or not.
I love it. 100 episodes for sure. The amount of personal development that happens in those first 100 episodes is great too. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Laban, for being with us. Any last words of where we can reach out to you, connect with you, find out more about what you're up to?
Look,
definitely buy your book too.
Yeah, I'm the world's best courage coach, and I teach people how to take bold, massive, and strategically courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes. And I do that through being a podcast host, a speaker, a coach, and I've got a mastermind, and I run events, right? And all of that can be found through the website, labanditchburn.com. The Upgrade Your Life Tour is tickets are available now, upgradeyourlifetour.com. We've got some really great early bird tickets available. It's an amazing lineup. And love to hear from you, and love to engage with my audience, and happy to share any other knowledge that I can.
And above anything else, I will be there at the Upgrade Your Life tour.
You will be there already.
You better come and meet us and come and join us there.
We will.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, Laban, thank you so much for being on with us today. We'll bring you back lots more times because there's lots more to uncover about being the world's best courage coach that I think our podcast listeners need to hear. So until next time, Amplify You family, go out there, go check out Laban's podcast, go grab a ticket to the Upgrade Your Life tour. And we will see you in Florida in September then. All right.
Thanks,
have a great
Michelle.
week, guys.
Love
You're
your
welcome,
work.
Laban. Take care.